Have you ever noticed how some students start off super strong? They're incredibly consistent in their training, they turn up to every session, they enter competitions, and then gradually they start to disappear and then they're gone forever and you never hear from them again. It's an incredibly common problem. And if you want to grow your school, grow your classes, and help your students reach their goals, you need them to be training consistently. Now, in this training, we're going to dive into the key principles that make a great instructor and how you can make your classes more exciting than lounging on the sofa in a cold, damp, dark December evening. In case we never met, my name is Tom Barlow. I run Escapology BJJ along with my wife, and we are one of the most successful academies in the area. And a big part of that comes down to our understanding of how to combat attrition and keep our students training long term. To give you an example, the national average for attrition, volume of people who leave every single month, is around about 5 to 6% in the UK. For us, we are somewhere between 1.8 and 2.8%, so about half the national average. And that comes down to our ability to create a great environment and keep people training long term. So before we dive into how to solve this retention problem or how to combat attrition, we need to fully understand the problem. And there's two parts to it. The first are uncontrollable reasons. So uncontrollable reasons why people quit are things like they have moved away, they have a new job, something happens in their life that means they can no longer attend your classes. There's nothing we can do about it. But there's also controllable reasons. So controllable reasons why people quit might be something like they just don't feel they're progressing or they don't feel connected to the rest of the people in your academy. And like I said, there's not a lot we can do about the uncontrollable ones, but the controllable ones are within our power. We can fix them. And if you want to build a successful academy, you need to fix them. It's not just a nice thing to be able to do, it is critical. Once you do that, some magical things will happen. Your classes will become more enjoyable to teach. There'll be a better atmosphere in them. Your students will progress faster just simply because they're training more and they're putting more energy into what they're doing. And your academy will be healthier. Because you are able to retain more of your students, your income will go up. And you potentially run out of room, which is a pretty good problem to have often. And as I mentioned earlier, high retention is the indicator of a good instructor. It has nothing to do with world titles. So now let's look at some of the key principles behind combating attrition. When we're thinking about attrition, there are a few core ideas that we want to keep in our mind. The first one is, how can we create an environment that people want to train long term? Second, what can you do to help your students be more consistent? Finally, how can you avoid the common reasons that people break their training habits? Now, many of the answers to these questions might be interlinked. There might be one solution that hits many of those different questions. But there's one common theme among all of them, and that is you. Like I said, there's unavoidable reasons why people quit, but there's a lot of avoidable ones that instructors don't recognize, and there's a ton that can be done about them. So if you ever notice that your classes are getting quieter or people start to be leaving, you need to be asking yourself, what can I do about that situation? How can I improve my retention? The next principle that we want to talk about is something I call the most important question. In any session you teach, there are going to be two types of people. There are people who had a great class, and there's people who had kind of an okay or somewhat rubbish class. If you think about like the hammer and the nail situation, which is common in jiu-jitsu, people who are the hammer, they're loving life. The people who are the nail, kind of hating life a lot of the time. So after every single session, you want to ask yourself, who in this class is one step closer to black belt and who is one step closer to quitting? And for every person that you recognize who's closer to quitting, you need to think about, how can I get them back on track in their next class? This kind of question keeps you very honest in your coaching, and it allows you to kind of course correct people who are getting closer to quitting. And that's something you want to be aware of the whole time, looking at your student body and recognizing the people who are progressing and the people who are kind of starting to slip off. And then what can we do to attack that? The final and probably the most important principle that I want to talk about is called attitude is everything. Have you ever wondered what separates like a good instructor from a great instructor? I'm not talking about like in terms of like competitive performance from their students. I'm talking about instructors who have great academies, because those are two very different things. There are some amazing competitive instructors out there who struggle to keep their doors open, who just don't attract people to train with them long term. Okay, and we all know who those people are. There are many famous names like that. And then there are people that you've probably never created a successful athlete in their life, but they have hundreds and hundreds of students who are there progressing, loving jiu-jitsu and improving. Okay, not every school needs to be creating world champions. It's about the growth and what's important for the student as well. So I would say that having a solid understanding of jiu-jitsu is important. Like, you want to be teaching real techniques. You want your students to be able to get good. You want them to be able to, you want to hold them to a standard of good jiu-jitsu. But if you think about the instructor's attitude and the experience they create for the students, that's often way more important. If you think back to like either classes or seminars or camps that you've enjoyed, the difference is probably not going to be the technique. You might not even remember those techniques. It will be the attitude of the instructor and how they presented it, the environment that they created. And the attitude is why I say you see no-name instructors just with awesome, thriving schools, and then multiple-time world champions who struggle because people just don't like their attitude and the environment that they create. There's a famous saying, which is that your attitude determines your altitude. To help illustrate this point, there's a really cool task I like to do with instructors. And I want you to think about this question. And if you want, you can write down some answers. If your academy blew up today, so you lost all of your training partners, your friends, your instructors, you had literally no choice but to find a new instructor, what criteria would you look for? Now, you can take a few minutes to think about this. I would highly recommend you pause this video, set a timer for like 2-3 minutes, and then just write down some of the things that you would look for, okay? Once you've done that, next to each of those points, put an A or an S. An A stands for attitude and an S stands for skill. And the way to distinguish between the two is like this. If I put a gun to your head, could you do that thing? For example, if I put a gun to your head, could you attempt to be funny? The answer is probably yes. You might fail, but you'd be giving it a good try, right? You would try your damned hardest to be as funny as you could be so that that trigger didn't go off. But for example, if I put a gun to your head, you couldn't suddenly turn yourself into a world champion or do a flying go-go platter or any of those kind of things. And so if you couldn't do them, then it's an S. It's a skill. It's something that you need to develop, okay? Now, typically what happens when we do this task with instructors, you get this long list of things. So for example, you want your new instructor to be like engaging. You want them to have integrity, good technical knowledge, someone that communicates well, someone that's fun, someone that's encouraging, someone that might have like high BJJ skills, okay? And then within all of those, you're going to find out that the vast majority of the things that you have are going to be A's. They're attitude-based, not skill-based. So in my list, integrity, engaging, good communicator, fun, encouraging, all attitude-based. The only ones that are really skill-based are like technical knowledge and high-level BJJ skills. Okay. Outside of that, it is the attitude that's going to be the most important. And the really cool thing is that if it's attitude-based that is important, you can fake that. You can become that type of instructor just with a little bit of practice. All you need to do is learn how to do it. Is just do the thing that you want to do. Go into your class, be encouraging to your students, try and crack a joke, have fun, create a positive atmosphere. It might take a little bit of time and it won't be perfect at the start, but it's something that you can do. You can develop that attitude. You can develop the skills as well, but it might take a little bit longer. Attitude is something that you can switch on and off like that. Just think about it, like, if you suddenly had a bad day at work, or how fast can your attitude change from being like good to bad? All it takes for people is someone to cut them up in while they're driving, and suddenly they have this stinking attitude and this hate for that person who's in front of them. Okay, that's how fast your attitude can change. Skills can take a lot longer. So the cool thing is, changing your attitude is pretty easy. And like I said, it is the most important thing that you can do, and it's the most important part of being a great instructor. So now let's look at some of the process, some of the key reasons that people quit and what you can do about it. Okay, I'm going to go over 5 different things. The first one is one of the SSL pyramid is missing. So SSL is a very simple way of thinking about the class, and every single one of your class should contain an element of smiling, an element of sweating, and an element of learning, SSL. So smiling could be things like people find they're engaged, they're enjoying training, they're having a good time, right? That's the smiling element. The sweating element is they want to feel challenged. They want to feel like they're getting healthier. They want to feel like they're having a workout. And then learning is they want to feel like their skills developing. Okay, and if any of those are missing within your class structure, you're going to find that people tend to drop off after a while. There's 3 different types of instructors if you're missing one of those legs of that pyramid. Okay, so you have the drill sergeant. Okay, the drill sergeant is the person they have like great technique, their training's always super hard, it's going to be a war out there, but it's never any fun. They're shouting and screaming at you, and you come out of class thinking like, wow, that was tough, but man, I just don't want to deal with that every session. Eventually the people in those classes are going to drop off. So that is the person who's missing that fun element. Now you might have someone who I like to call the professor. They have like excellent technique, they're super engaging, but they talk for 2 hours, and then maybe at the end of the class you get 1 round and you come out bone dry and you're just like, well, I feel like I learned something, but I really didn't get a good workout. Again, same problem. You're gonna probably end up quitting. Okay. The last one is the comedian, right? Tons of fun. They might even have a really hard session. Like you got to work out, you did loads of sparring, it was awesome, they were engaging, but at the end of the session you didn't really learn anything. All that you did was just got to train a little bit. And again, same problem. If you're never learning anything, suddenly you're going to be like, wow, man, those guys over there, they seem to be learning all of this cool stuff. I want to learn that. How come I never get taught this stuff? People end up quitting for the same reason. So the solution to this is relatively simple. You need to figure out what part of that SSL pyramid is missing and then re-inject it back into your classes. The ways that you can do that are very simple. All you need to do is get feedback from your students. Like regularly at the end of the class, just talk to someone and be like, hey, did you enjoy the session tonight? What did you enjoy? What would you like to see more of? What do you like to see less of? By talking to your students, you can get their opinion on what they want to see more in your sessions. Some of it might be absolute rubbish, but it can give you an idea about where you need to improve. The other thing that you might want to consider doing is creating different types of classes. So for example, like having comp classes. People in comp classes expect a harder training session. They expect it to be kind of a little bit more serious, okay? And it's okay to have that in there as well, because that's the expectation of the class. But you might also want to have an outlet for people who just want to train and have fun. They just want to have a good time. They're not worried about winning world championships, and they're just out there for the crack and enjoying jiu-jitsu and being part of the jiu-jitsu lifestyle. So there's 2 simple solutions that you can do to correct this SSL pyramid. Okay. Retention killer number 2, injury. This is by far the biggest reason that people quit. Okay, and it's kind of really understandable. The other reason is if they don't quit because of the injury, it's because they're worried that it might happen again. Okay, injury breaks habits, and it can make in returning to the mat intimidating. Okay, what if, not even just from the sense of if they might get injured again, but what if everybody's got better than me? What if I can't remember jiu-jitsu? What if my cardio's gone? And people will just drift away because it's hard to restart, or it can be. So what we want to try to do is a couple of different things to solve this problem. The first thing is we always want to be promoting a safe training environment. The mats that we have should be well maintained. The equipment should be well maintained, should be cleaned regularly. Any kind of sharp objects should be moved. We want people to be aware of their environment and, have that safe training environment. The next thing is we want to promote safe training habits. We need to teach people how to tap. It's something that we take for granted, but the amount of people who have never been taught how to tap or when to tap or what to tap to is staggering. And it's a very simple conversation you should have with people when they first start classes. We want to teach people how to keep themselves safe when they're training, the things that can get them injured. So, having their body out of alignment, not being mat aware, watching out for their training partners, all of that sort of stuff. Okay. We want to create injury training plans. So if someone gets injured, how can we help them maintain their habit? Can they come and be an assistant coach? Can they still train? What can they train? Okay, how can we pull them back in and keep them on the mats? Okay, And then the final thing is they are forced to be away, check in on them, see how they're getting on, see when they're going to return. You can pull people back in that way. And if you do these things, then you'll be able to, number one, avoid injuries from happening in the first place. And number two, if an injury does happen, you'll be able to keep that student engaged and they'll be able to return right away like nothing's ever happened. It is crucial that you do this. The next one is a feeling of lack of progress. Okay, getting good at jiu-jitsu, it takes a long time and it does not happen in a linear fashion. It is all over the place. Okay, some days you'll feel great, other days you'll feel terrible, you'll feel like you're backsliding. That person who you were doing great against now suddenly is like super challenging and you can never win a round against them. It's a cruel mistress. Okay, as a result, when people feel like they're not improving, they start to feel down on themselves. I just don't want to train a class. I feel like I'm not getting anywhere, and they become more likely to quit. So to combat this, what we need to do is a couple of different things. We want to be able to create long-term and short-term goals. So what is the short-term thing that we're working on? What area of our jiu-jitsu are we trying to improve? What's our longer-term goal? Are we trying to work out to a competition? And how can I support my students in achieving those things? Once a goal is completed, we then want to be able to renew that goal. So let's say someone gets the blue belt. It's really common you hear about this blue belt-itis where they hit blue belt and they quit. Okay, we don't want that. When someone gets to a blue belt, it's like, brilliant, you got to blue belt. What's next? Okay, what are we trying to work towards next? What's the next goal that we're going to get to? You come this far in your journey, you're doing a great job, but we need to get to our purple belt. How are we going to achieve that? What plan are we going to put in place to do that? So we're continually renewing their goals. The other thing is we want to be balancing our training. So within our students, we want to give them rounds that are challenging, and also we want to give them rounds that they can just have some fun in, that can be easy. They feel like they can just do their jiu-jitsu. As instructors, we need to be helping them do that. Okay, that is really, really important. Then we also want to be thinking about encouraging our students not to look at anybody else. Not to focus on that 20-year-old kid who's super athletic and picks up jiu-jitsu super fast when they're like a 45-year-old dad who works in an office. Okay, look at how far they've come. That's where things like, competitions, belts, like monitoring health and fitness can become really important. You can say, man, when you first came in here, you could barely do a press-up. Okay, you couldn't even complete the warm-up, but now look at you, you're doing a full class. You are doing an amazing job. And encourage them to look at themselves and remind them that they are on their own journey. Our training partners are at a different space in their life. Where we're going is what's important, and where we've come from is what is important as well. And then the final thing, and this is a big mistake from a lot of instructors, is something that we call statue theory. Okay, we are not going to overcorrect our students. Like jiu-jitsu, getting good at any technique in jiu-jitsu is a matter of time. There's ways that we can kind of shortcut the process, but really it takes time to get good at anything. Getting to like a black belt, for example, the first thing that we need to do, this is where statue theory comes from, is we have a block of marble. We want it to get it look somewhat like the statue. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as it kind of looks like whatever we're trying to do, if it kind of looks like a berimbolo, kind of looks like a triangle, that's good enough to start with. Over time, we can refine the details and refine the skills so that in like a year's time or 2 years' time, they're doing that berimbolo perfectly. But if we overcorrect them too much too soon, they're just going to feel like they're rubbish and they're never going to be able to get this technique. And that's not how jiu-jitsu works. It takes time to get good at stuff. Next one, and this is a really important one and very, very common, is that there are no relationships built within their academy. That's one of the biggest reasons that people find it easy to quit, okay, because they don't become ingrained in your community. Okay, we want students to feel part of our community from day one. We want them to build relationships with their team members, with the instructors. So there's a couple of things that we can do to combat this one. First one is get to know your students, find out their names, find out their jobs, genuinely take an interest in what they do in their lives. Okay, that's very simple. We want to use the 3 times rule. Okay, 3 times rule, use their name 3 times, make contact with them 3 times, anything to let them know that you see them in your classes. So welcome everybody to class, shake their hands, move them around a little bit. Stuff like that makes a big difference. Next thing that you can do is start to focus on the middle 80. So within your academy, there are 10% of people who are amazing and they get tons of praise all of the time, tons of recognition because they're always doing really cool stuff. And then you get 10% of the people who are rubbish and they get tons of attention, tons of recognition all the time because you're always helping them. That middle 80% of the people is where you need to focus your attention. You need to be balanced in your coaching. So look for the people who are just doing okay and give them some encouragement and give them support and push them as much as you're doing the other two groups. You want to create sub-communities within your academy. So the people who are interested in competition, give them an outlet for that. Get them together to be part of that community and support them in ways that you can. People who are more interested in like learning technique or whatever it is, or takedowns, create these little sub-communities within your school so that everybody has a place to train and everybody can feel valued. The next thing you want to do is try to run events and activities both inside and outside your academy. So like put on seminars, go to events together as a group, so competitions or whatever, have like, Christmas parties. Encourage that kind of outside activity so that everybody forms these bonds and it becomes more challenging. They can't disappear off because no one notices they're not training anymore. The final thing that you want to do is communicate with your students regularly. So we have this wonderful thing around us called social media. You can contact people on social media. You can put up pictures of your class and tag people in. You can give your students shout outs in the middle of the class. You can highlight things that they've done well. You can use stuff like student of the day. You can get them to demonstrate techniques. You can send them emails. You can just pick up the phone and call them and say, "Hey John, how are you doing today? I saw you in class the other day. You were doing an awesome job. Is there anything that I can help you with?" Stuff like that goes so far to develop the relationship and help make people feel part of your school. Okay, final one. And this is one of the hardest ones for instructors to understand, which is low value service. Okay, if you've got two things that are essentially the same value, it's very easy for transition from one to the other. Okay, and in terms of service, the more value you create within your programs, within your school, the longer the student is going to stay with you. You might also be able to charge them slightly higher fees. The best example that I can think of is something like Weight Watchers versus a personal nutritionist. The end goal for both of those is that you're going to lose weight, ideally. They're both going to probably help you track your progress, and they're both probably going to give you some level of support on your way, whether it's weekly weigh-ins or a weekly call. However, the level of the service, the value of the service of that nutritionist is perceived way higher because they're going to give you a more personal service. They're going to help you stay on track. They're going to do all the other things that a nutritionist will do versus just attending a Weight Watchers meeting. And that is what you want to achieve within your classes as well. So if we can create very high value service within our school, people are going to value it more, want to train more, and will stay longer. So there's some very simple things that you can do to create higher value service. You can make sure that your facility is clean and tidy and well maintained. Very, very simple. You can get to know everybody's name, and when they step on the mat, welcome them to class, so make them feel important. You can check in with them regularly. You can run free quarterly seminars. You can film weekly class techniques and send it out to everybody. But the higher your perceived value, the longer a student will stay with you and the lower the chance they'll go looking for an alternative. So I would highly recommend looking for all the different ways that you can increase the value of your service. Some might cost you a little bit of money, but others are going to be completely free, and put all of that together, you're going to have a high value product which people want. So final thoughts. Firstly, this might seem a lot of work, and at the start it kind of can be when you're not used to doing this stuff regularly. But over time, if you're consistent in what you're doing, they're going to become natural and you're going to see your retention skyrocket. There is this thing within like the sales and marketing world that I think it's 5 times easier to sell to someone who's already bought from you than it is to get a new customer. And within our academy, it's the same thing. It is so much easier to keep those people who understand the value of what you're doing in your school than it is to attract a new member. And often as instructors, we get caught in this idea of we'll just get more people in, we'll get more people in, and forget that that is harder than getting the people who are already in to continue training for longer. And that is how you're really going to grow your school. If you can take that retention from someone stays for 5 months, up to 10 months, up to 12 months, up to 2 years, up to 3 years, that is where you're going to see massive, massive growth and you're just going to find it a more fulfilling experience. Okay, I've added in one final thing within this. This is an old lesson plan that I wrote. I would highly recommend it if you're just getting new, or if you're just starting out on developing the retention within your academy, use something like this. And it has everything that you need to do. So there's a before class check-in, there is like notes on your warm-up and why we do it, some stuff about the curriculum that you could be doing. So like some of the spotlighting and 3 times rule. High energy finish, that is one of the easiest ways to add that kind of sweating element into your class. What can we do to leave people on that high? End of class checklist, and then after class checklist and the sign-in date. So it's got everything you basically need to run or to like integrate these things into your academy in different ways. Okay, so I would highly recommend you use it. The other cool thing about this as well is if you do start using it, you can just take a photocopy of it or a picture of it, send it out to your students, and it will increase the value of your service. Like I said, hopefully you found this useful. There's tons more resources, and including our full instructor training program at Escapology Online. There's a link in this document that you can take a look at, or it's online.escapologybjj.com. Sorry, online/escapologybjj.com, and you can check it out from there. Have an amazing day, and if you've got any questions, my email is tom@escapologybjj.com. Let me know. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.